Este encuentro se ha ido posicionando en el calendario regional como una oportunidad relevante para el intercambio entre expertos y líderes del sector financiero comprometidos con la sostenibilidad y las políticas éticas de inversión. Ayer tuvimos harto material interesante. Queremos agradecer nuevamente a la Facultad de Economía y Negocios de la Universidad Andrés Bello por recibirnos en este fantástico auditorio y a todos los sponsors que han hecho posible este congreso. Los voy a nombrar, por supuesto. AFP Capital como sponsor Gold Plus. En el Américas como sponsor Gold, Vice Vida y Vice Inversiones como sponsor Silver, Columbia Threadneedle Investment, Picked Asset Management y M&D como sponsors Bronce y Diligent. Recordad también que tenemos el apoyo de Acción Empresas, la Cámara de Comercio de Santiago, la Confederación de la Producción y del Comercio, Empathy, la Federación Internacional de Administradores de Fondos de Pensiones, la FIAP, la Fundación Generación Empresarial, el think tank FIDE, la Universidad Finisterra, Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, Pacto Global Chile, Pacto Global Colombia, Red América, la Iniciativa Financiera del Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente y Spain SIF. Contamos con la cobertura de Comunicarse, DSI Hoy, que yo represento, y Sustanomics. También Diligent como Content Partner. La jornada de hoy va a ser algo distinta a lo que tuvimos ayer, porque después del break, que viene a las 11 de la mañana, nos vamos a dividir en dos salas que están aquí en estos dos costados. La sala 1 y la sala 2, ahí van a poder ver el contenido de cada una de las dos salas, que tienen dos paneles cada una. Cada uno puede elegir a cuál asistir. Después de eso nos volvemos a juntar aquí para un cierre. Vamos a partir. Entonces, recuerden que a través del QR, que en algún minuto también va a aparecer, pueden medir la huella, o sea, pueden contestar una pequeña encuesta para medir la huella de este evento. Y además también hay un QR para hacer las preguntas para los panelistas más adelante. Y vamos a partir entonces con el programa de hoy, con una presentación de Nawar Alsaadi. Él es fundador y CEO de Kanata Advisors, en la que él va a abordar la relación entre sostenibilidad y creación de valor desde una perspectiva conceptual y casuística, además basándose en extensa data. Ya lo oyeron ahí probando los micrófonos. Nawar es el director ejecutivo y fundador de Kanata Advisors, como les decía, una firma de asesoría en tecnología financiera sostenible con sede en Toronto, Canadá. Antes de fundar Kanata, Nawar ocupó varios puestos de alto nivel relacionados con temas ESG. Entre ellos fue director de impacto en Scope for Capital, gerente senior de cartera para inversiones ESG en Canada Post Pension Plan. Ustedes saben que ahí es un tremendo industria la de los fondos de pensiones canadienses. Y director de perspectivas ESG en Ney Investment, entre puestos otros varios ejecutivos y de asesorías. Nawar tiene una maestría en administración de empresas de la Universidad de Questrom School of Business, la Universidad de Boston, y posee diversas calificaciones en el área. Gracias, Nawar. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Buenos dias. It is really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for Centro RS and LS20 for the invitation. The topic I'll be speaking about today is on leveraging sustainability for value creation, why real sustainability is good business. And this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, because I do really believe that the sustainable transition can only take place if we actually fuse business and sustainability. But before jumping into all of that, just a little bit about myself, although I think in the introduction they already talked about myself, but I'll talk again about myself. So anyways, I'll briefly go over this. I have 15 years experience in the sustainable investing space. I'm the CEO of Kanata Advisors. I work with ESG fintech companies to help them build solutions to help the sustainable transition. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Kanata Q, a sustainability marketplace to connect buyers and sellers of sustainability solutions. And prior to that, I held a number of senior positions in the sustainable investing space with Semper Augustus Capital, with Scope for Capital, and Canada Post Pension Plan, among others. I also serve on a number of boards of sustainability solution companies. All right, enough self-promotion. Now let's go into the subject matter. And I'd like to level set and explain what value creation is. Obviously, everyone here, I think, have a sense of what value creation is, but I think it's helpful for all of us to agree on a definition. So value creation is the process of generating economic, social, or environmental benefit for stakeholders, customers, shareholders, employees, or society at large. Value creators leverage financial, natural, and human capital to produce a net benefit. And that basically means outcomes exceeding input cost. And in the context of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the economic side or the financial side of value creation using sustainability factors. So with that, I'd like to show you here what we mean by value creation in a pure business context. Let's forget about sustainability. When we talk about value creation in a company or about a company, we usually think about certain characteristics or markers. Companies that create value have a competitive advantage. They have effective risk management strategies. They have easy access to capital. They have efficient operations, resilient supply chains, positive business reputation, loyal customers, productive employees, and business intelligence capabilities. These are some of the characteristics that we usually associate with companies that basically create financial value. And to say it really in very simple terms, companies that turns $1 into $2. But what I'd like to do is take these markers and link them to three pillars. There are actually, if you distill the markers I just shared with you, there are three ways to create value: risk reduction, cost reduction, and business growth. So if you see the markers I shared with you, each one fits under one of these pillars. So you don't need to think about 10, 20 characteristics. It's helpful to think about these three pillars. And it's important to keep these three pillars in mind because the rest of the presentation is going to link back to them. So now moving on to business sustainability. So again, just a definition here before we move forward. Sustainable business is doing business without negatively impacting the environment, the community, or society as a whole. Companies and investors that include social and environmental considerations in their business and investment strategy tend to create sustainable economic value. That's what we mean by business sustainability. And similar to what I just shared earlier about the characteristics of value creation, sustainable companies have distinctive markers. Here I've chosen 9 of them. Sustainable businesses are ethical. They manage their climate and environmental risk. They seek to have sustainable products. They design sustainable products. They use resources efficiency. They try to have, or at least attempt, or hopefully reach a circular business model. They are purpose-driven. They enjoy high trust and transparency. They have good employee engagement, and they have responsible supply chains. Again, there might be other characteristics, but for this presentation, I'm going to use these 9 characteristics of a sustainable business. And what we're going to do now is we're going to have a brain teaser or a puzzle where I'm going to try, or we are going to try, to link every characteristic here to the 3 value creation pillars that I've just introduced. So let's start with employee engagement. If you're not familiar with employee engagement is the degree of employee involvement and enthusiasm for their work. Basically, if you're excited about your work, think about your work. If you want to go to your work, if you're happy about it, if you'll recommend it to somebody else. And the way you get employee engagement is by having fair pay, safe work environment, and opportunity to grow, a respectable working environment. These are the characteristics of good employee engagement. And according to research, I'm going to share with you what you see in the gray box here, statistics from Gallup. They looked at the benefits of employee engagement with over 2 million employees in about 100 countries. And they found out that well-engaged employees are more present in the workplace, 78% less absenteeism, 20 to 51% decrease in turnover, 28% decrease in shrinkage or theft at the workplace, more than 60% decrease in safety incidents, and a 32% decrease in quality defects. What does that mean? Lower cost and better productivity. And we see this here in the statistics. Companies where 80% of the employees recommend the place as a good place to work have a much higher EBITDA margin than companies where 60% or less of the employees recommend the place to work. So you see these numbers translate in actual results. So if we were to go back to the puzzle, the brain teaser, we can safely say that employee engagement creates value through cost reduction. Now, moving on to the next one, which is sustainable product design. So sustainable products are products that minimize the environmental impact of the products that are produced. And they think, and when I say sustainable product design, it's across the life cycle. It's from the sourcing, the making, the distribution, and the waste management. And these products that are labeled sustainable have been enjoying phenomenal growth since 2018, and these data ties to the United States, but there are similar metrics around the world. Sustainable labeled products have grown 55% faster than conventional labeled products. And it's not just the growth, it's also the market share. Today, the market share of sustainable labeled products is just under 20% compared to under 14% in 2015. Consumers are willing to pay 12% more on average globally for sustainable labeled products. And US consumers today are willing to pay $44 billion in additional spending on sustainable products if they can find them. So looking at all these factors, where would you put sustainable products in our puzzle? Business growth, exactly. If you have sustainable products, you're going to drive business. So that's another way to create value using sustainable products. Now moving on to climate risk management. Here I'm going to focus on GHG emissions. So this is a study from Columbia University. They looked at 17,000 publicly traded companies over a 4-year period, and they wanted to understand the relationship between decarbonization and PE ratios. So for those of you who work in the investment space, obviously PE ratios or price earning ratios are very important. And they found out that a 10% decrease in decarbonization leads to a 0.5% expansion in the PE ratio. Now this might be small, but if you actually look at certain sectors, for example, the European large cap energy and industrial companies, the expansion in the PE is between 9 and 18%. So a 10% reduction in the carbon emissions of these companies leads to between 9 and 18% expansion in the PE. And just to put this in an example, if a stock was trading at $36 and they were earning $2 a share, if they were to decarbonize, the stock price, at least according to this research, theoretically will go up to almost $43. And the reason for this is that there are reasons why PE expands. The PE usually expands because there's an expectation of higher growth, lower risk, or lower investment needs in the business. And in this context, it's probably tied to lower risk because carbon prices are very high in Europe. So European companies that lower their carbon emissions experience an expansion in PE. So we can safely put at least this example in terms of value creation through the risk reduction pillar. So moving on to a circular business model. A circular business model basically focuses on minimizing waste and maximizing resource waste. What you see on the graphic is what, the flat line on the graphic here is the economy we have today. What we have today is a take, make, waste business model. The circular economy takes and then goes into a loop at the make stage. And when I mean a loop, it means these businesses, they try to recycle, repair, repurpose. They try to avoid going into the waste side of the equation. But unfortunately today, 93% of companies, of worldwide production is not circular. And there's tremendous economies to be made from a circular business model. According to a data from Centro, they estimated that the circular economy could capture 4.5 trillion in lost economic output by 2030. And the reason for this is reduce material use, reduce waste management, and monetizing wasted resource capacity. And here, this is a generic number, 4.5 trillion, but actually if you click into it, the consumer sector, according to research, would save 700 billion by being circular. The industrial sector alone in the US would save $1.5 trillion by being circular. This is really about business. This is not about circularity. And that's why circular business models create value through cost reduction. Now, moving on to a purpose-driven business. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand how does a purpose-driven business actually creates value? A purpose-driven company is an organization basically that places its purpose or mission at the center of its business strategy or operations. As a matter of fact, purpose-driven companies put purpose ahead of profitability. And this is a bit counterintuitive when we talk about financial value creation, but there is a great benefit from being a purpose-driven company. The consumers love purpose-driven companies. They're 4 times more likely to buy from purpose-driven companies compared to conventional companies. They are 6 times more likely to protect the company and defend it in case its reputation were hurt. They are 4.5 times more likely to champion the company and talk about it. And they are more than 4 times likely to trust the company. And that's why purpose-driven companies grow 3 times faster than their competitors. This is how purpose joins business to create financial value, and that's why purpose-driven companies go under business growth. Now, moving on to high trust and transparency, and here I'm going to use a data point from Deloitte. Basically, Deloitte built this index that they call the Trust Index, and it has 4 quadrants. First one is humanity, which include empathy and fairness, transparency, capability, and reliability. These are the 4 ways you judge the trust and transparency of a business according to this index. And what happens, and according to data from Deloitte, they talked to 1,300 B2B customers from the energy and chemical sectors, and they wanted to understand the way they perceive the companies they buy from as customers. And it turned out that the companies that are ranked highly on trust, customers prefer them much more than companies that are not trusted. And that might sound obviously intuitive, but you see it here in the data. Customers are 3 times more likely to sign a long-term contract from a supplier they trust. More than 1.5 times likely to choose the supplier over alternative. They're even more likely to pay a higher price, even if there is a cheaper price available. And they are 1.5 times more likely to continue working with the supplier despite a previous mistake or a product service failure. So this is why Deloitte called building trust as the single greatest opportunity to create competitive advantage. And that's why, looking at these data points, we can safely put high trust and transparency under the business growth pillar. Now, for our 3 remaining pieces, we'll go with responsible supply chains now. And a responsible supply chain, for those who are not familiar with what a responsible supply chain, it's really about being an ethical and sustainable supplier. And what I mean ethical and sustainable, I mean ethical and sustainable around your environmental performance, around your human rights, about having healthy working conditions, about being in compliance with regulations. And there is value in companies seeking a responsible supply chain. I'm going to show you this value by showing you the cost of being non-responsible in terms of managing your supply chain. So here are some examples. Companies face up to $120 billion in environmental costs in their supply chain. So managing your supply chain with an environmental lens reduces that risk. From a regulatory perspective, and yesterday we talked about regulation. So for example, in Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive can penalize you up to 5% of your worldwide revenues if you have an unsustainable supply chain. In Canada, where I am based and where I am from, you can have criminal prosecution if you have human rights violations in your supply chain. 36% of B2B customers would change suppliers if the supplier is not sustainable. 94% of the largest companies in Europe look at sustainability criteria when selecting a supplier. And finally, this is a very interesting point. A lot of supply chain risk comes across or surfaces through a hit to our company's reputation. And according to academic research, between 25% and 35% of the value, the stock market value of a company ties to its reputation. So every time you have an unresponsible supply chain, you're putting directly 25 to 35% of the valuation of your company at risk. And that's why I'm placing responsible supply chain under the risk reduction pillar. Now, moving on to ethical business practices. And again, that's one of the difficult areas where people who are not familiar with sustainability don't necessarily understand why being ethical necessarily create business value, why it's so important beyond morality. But we will, and what I mean by the way ethical, meaning not being involved in fraud or violating regulation or doing insider trading or misguiding your stakeholders. There are many ways to define, obviously, being unethical, but there is a very high business cost for being unethical. I think not a lot of people know that US companies have paid over $1 trillion in fines since 2000 for ethical misconduct. Today, companies pay on average globally $50 billion a year in fines for ethical misconduct. These are funds that could go to shareholders and stakeholders. Unethical businesses, after they disclose that unethical behavior, underperform for 5 years after they announce that misconduct. And you can see it from the chart to the left, the daily performance of companies that disclose unethical behavior lag their industry peers for 5 years. And finally, the total cost of misconduct is $3 for every $1 gained from unethical practices. So it's a losing proposition. Now, this is a hard one to place, whether you put it under cost reduction or risk reduction. I've opted for risk reduction because obviously not every business is being unethical, and it's hard sometimes to tell. So globally, it is a risk reduction approach. So I put it under the risk reduction. So now we reached the last one on resource efficiency, and that's a very easy one to kind of grasp. Resource efficiency is about corporate resource efficiency. It's about the optimal use of resources, whether it is energy efficiency, material efficiency, water efficiency, or waste reduction. And so basically, companies that use less resources, the idea is they create more value. And McKinsey looked at this question, and they saw a significant correlation between a company resource efficiency and the strength of its financial performance. They actually found out in certain sectors, reducing resource cost can improve operating profit by up to 60%. And I will share with you two examples. One of them is from 3M. They started in the mid-70s a program called Pollution Prevention Pays, and it's a program really that's focused on efficiency, about having less waste, about recycling more, about capturing more value through the whole industrial and production process. They saved over $2.2 billion to date. A more recent example from a US-based utility focusing on efficiency, better inventory management, more energy efficiency, and they've saving $180 million a year. And there are many, many such examples. So now with resource efficiency done, we can safely put it under the cost reduction pillar. We have basically now in 10, 15 minutes, we've moved all these markers into the 3 value creation pillars. Now, there's one thing I didn't do, is that some of these pillars some of these markers can be under more than one pillar. But for the sake of simplicity, I've just tied each one to one just to give you an idea of how you should think about it. Now, in just the last minutes I have, I just want to touch on something I call sustainable value creation financial metrics mapping. And I'm calling it mapping, but it's not exactly mapping. It's about really having a mindset. Every time you hear about these ideas, I mean, these are great examples. I mean, of course, I gave you the examples. They are great examples. But they are generic examples. I want you to have a mindset as you think about these things. So what we will do is I'm going to share with you 3 slides. And I'm going to use decarbonization as an example when I talk about financial mapping. So Centro looked at the 2,000 largest companies around the world from a revenue perspective. They looked at their decarbonization initiatives, and they found out that more than 80% of these companies either invest in energy efficiency or renewable energy, basically initiatives, or waste reduction initiatives. So I'm going to focus on these two sides. And what I will do is I'll start with this process. When you first hear about a sustainable initiative, like company wanting to switch to renewable energy, or a company wanting to reduce its waste, the first thing you should do is build a narrative. I call it business value creation narrative. What does that mean, switching to renewable energy? Probably means capital investment. So there's CapEx involved. It potentially also means lowering energy cost and mitigating price volatility. So that's basically the story. If you are a sustainability manager, that's what you're going to tell your team, your manager or your bosses. When we talk about waste reduction, there's a similar narrative. Well, which capital I need for waste reduction? What's the benefit? Lowering waste, maybe disposal costs, improving operational efficiencies, enhancing reputation, lowering environmental risk. So if you are an investor and a company talks about waste reduction, these are the things that pop into your head. Now, once you have that narrative, you can link it to financial metrics. And what I mean by that, I've color-coded this to really make it, I think, accessible. When we talk about CapEx, we're talking about property, plant, and equipment. We're talking about cash flow from operations. Lower energy costs, that's OPEX, that's net income, that's operating cash flow. Lower volatility, that's discount rate. Now, I'm not putting numbers around these things, but once you have that map, you can put numbers and calculate net present value. You can calculate potential returns. Very similar for reduced waste management. Most of them tie to financial metrics. These are not just stories. These are financial metrics that are going to impact the result of a company or a business. And each one of them can't be tied. I mean, the CapEx one is easy to tie in. The operational efficiencies is easy to tie in. Reputation, sometimes people struggle with it, but it goes under intangible business assets, and environmental goes under a discount rate. So that's really the mindset you should have as we talk about these things, and they should be almost second nature to you. So with that, let me take it to the conclusion. Business sustainability is a key contributor to financial value creation. Business sustainability initiatives fit within 3 buckets: risk reduction, cost reduction, and business growth. Sustainability initiatives can and should be mapped to financial metrics. Investors are increasingly grasping the business value of sustainability. And on this last point, this is not just a nice slogan that I'm putting out here. First graph, over the last 10 years, the market cap growth of the clean economy stocks, according to FTSE Russell methodology, has grown twice the rate of the global stock market. And the average value of a clean economy stock in 2016 was $1 billion. Today, or at least last year, was $7 billion, a 7-fold increase. So if this doesn't tell you that investors care about sustainability and value creation through sustainability, I'm not sure what else to tell you. And that's why I'm reaching the end of this presentation. So thank you for your time. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn if you'd like to continue this discussion. And I'm more than happy to open it for Q&A. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. So please ask your question. If you're not comfortable asking it in English, ask it in Spanish, and Eduardo will translate for me.
Nawar, thank you. Y por favor aprovechen a Nawar que lo trajimos desde muy lejos, hay que sacarle el mayor provecho. My question, what you explained, and I don't want to sound rude, but it was really simple. It's like very logical thing in a way to approach and to understand sustainability and value creation. Why a concept that is simple to explain as you make today? This is about cost, this is about growing opportunities for business, this is about risk reduction. Why so difficult to translate that to the day-to-day? Why not more companies are making the connection between sustainability and cost, business opportunities, and risk reduction?
Well, because I didn't speak to all companies, that's why. No, well, the reason I believe that people are confused about this is for a long time we didn't have the data. I've cited more than 22 pieces of research. A lot of this research is from the last 2, 3, 4 years at the most. So we don't have a long body of history. We have decades of old ways of thinking. Sustainability is cost. We don't understand these causations and correlations. The other reason is that as policy around climate and sustainability take hold, the cost of being unsustainable increases. So the value creation, value sustainability increases, and this is often missed, that people forget that we don't exist in the same world where we were, where sustainability had no cost, where pollution either was not reported or not penalized, or consumers didn't care. So I believe that's why what I'm sharing might sound simple for people maybe in this room who understand these concepts or are up to date. But the message I'm sharing with you, and I've shared it a lot with a lot of my followers and a lot of conferences as well, there's nothing here that is my opinion. These are all research pieces that anybody who's skeptical can read through, and there are many other pieces of research that say the same thing. Now, it doesn't mean that everything you do in sustainability is profitable. I will share this example. There was a big study that was done on all decarbonization projects in the US, 10,000 of them, over a 10-year period. And they found out that 76% of these projects have a net present value that is positive. So there is a number that is not immediately value creation, but 76% is massive over 10,000 projects. So the vast majority are profitable, and they will probably be even more profitable because this is a study over 10-year period, where in an earlier phases of the study, we didn't have the same focus on the price of carbon was lower, the regulation was looser. So hopefully this long answer answers your question. Do we have any other question? I have time for one more question. That's your chance. Take it.
Hi, thank you for thank you for your presentation. I think it was very good, especially because you have a lot of data we usually don't get through. My question is not really about the data, but what do you think that the big companies can do to help their provider, their supply chain, to be better and to be more in line what they are doing? What should be the help the big companies can do to help their supply chain?
Okay. That's a great question. So there are many ways to tackle it. An easy way, obviously, or logical way is obviously incentives. As we said, for example, customers prefer certain suppliers or sign with more suppliers that they trust. You can give these suppliers incentives by committing to longer term contracts if they do certain things, by even paying slightly more. That's more on the financial incentive, but there's also the practical side of things. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation, one of my companies is called Kanata Q, and it basically connects software solution providers with sustainability practitioners. And the reason I started that marketplace is that a lot of suppliers need maybe just simple software to track and connect with their clients. We need to create we have the digital infrastructure, but if you want your supplier to do certain things, first you have to invest in a software solution yourself, send them a portal or a link for them to log in to see what they have to do, how they have to report to you. There's an operational side to this that I think a lot of companies can help with by simplifying the process. So a combination, I would say, of operational guidance and financial incentives go a long way in getting suppliers along. At the end of the day, every business person, whether they are small business or big business, want to win that contract, want to preserve that contract. So there's a willingness from the supplier to participate, hopefully, if they get asked. Anyway, just my opinion in 2 minutes. Did you have a question? And that's the last one, I promise, because I'm putting this back.
Anwar, thanks for your presentation. My English is not good enough. Then
My Spanish is
I
worse.
need Eduardo. Then I switch to Spanish. Tal como lo decía Eduardo, tu argumento parece muy claro, muy lógico, pero me falta un elemento que a lo mejor es lo que dificulta esta mirada desde el mundo de los negocios y las finanzas. Y a lo mejor son los horizontes de tiempo, porque cuando miramos los elementos claves de la gestión sostenible de una compañía, esos beneficios se ven en el corto y medio plazo, pero la vinculación con los elementos financieros siempre se están evaluando en corto plazo, trimestralmente, y por ejemplo toda la gestión frente al cambio climático como reducción de riesgo. Los mayores riesgos del cambio climático se concretan en largos periodos de tiempo, pero tú tienes que hacer la inversión hoy y el beneficio voy a tardar en verlo. ¿Hay algo de eso en el por qué es difícil que el mercado, el sector financiero y las empresas logren ver este análisis tan claro de la creación de valor de la sostenibilidad?
All right, that's a long question.
Voy a hacer un comentario y es que ayer precisamente estábamos hablando de que este evento no tiene traducción y yo estaba hablando mal de los traductores, que son muy costosos, pero ya me di cuenta por qué, y ahora valoro su trabajo. Okay, so Beatriz was mentioning that, following my question, that yes, the concept that you explained is in a way simple, but then the challenge is time horizons. So in a way, and she makes the example of climate change. Mm-hmm. So obviously you need to make some or some, that will be like a cost for the company in the short term, but then obviously will have benefits in the long term. So maybe what Beatriz is asking is that maybe time horizons is one of the reasons why this like simple concept of focus on cost, business opportunities, grow business opportunities and risk is not matching that well, because we are like just thinking about the next trimester. We are thinking about what's going to happen with the oil prices today, with the rates, with the U.S. elections, you know. So we are focusing in the day-to-day, and so thinking about, like trying to understand this topic in the way you present today maybe is difficult. So about the time horizon, how to manage that.
So that's a great point. I really love this question because it's true. A lot of people are focusing on the short term. Actually, the average holding period of a stock today in the stock market is less than 6 months. It used to be 8 years in the 1950s. So nobody is focusing on the long term. But there are 2 points here. The way we address the time horizon is through policy. Policy brings the risk today. You have to do something this year, the next year, and the year after. That's why businesses cannot do everything. Policy turns time into in a way, a risk for you that you can't wait anymore. That's why there is, yesterday when we talked about engagement, I believe one of the few who presented in English, because maybe they said it in Spanish, but he did talk about engaging with governments, with policymakers. So it's very important to engage with them because exactly of that point. The other point, just it's more broader point. According to, I mean, I've been an investor for a long time, and I know that great companies are built for the long term. They're not managing quarter to quarter. As sustainable investors, we're looking for great companies. Those who don't manage for the long term will ultimately fail. And the ones who will survive, they'll be the sustainable ones. So there is almost a self-selection bias that they're going to take the ones focusing on the short term, because one day they have to pay $200 for carbon, and they are emitting a lot of carbon, and it's game over. So I believe that's what is going to happen. Just policy and hopefully good business sense will take us there. Anyways, you heard enough of me this morning. So thank you so much, and happy to chat about it later. Thank you.
We have a gift for you.
Oh. Oh. Thank you.